Hello and welcome to Key Radio Live. Today is episode 2 of the One Book Club, and I'm here with
You
Lucy
can
again.
you can call it 1-2, maybe.
No, because that's a different game. One that we will
Okay.
probably not ever talk about because none of us are able to talk about it.
True.
But yes, we're here together with Lucy, and we also have a special guest with us. Welcome, Scout.
Hello, everyone.
Scout is making his Key Radio Live debut today. He's one of our newest key keepers, so we're super excited to have him on the podcast for this week and next week. So he'll be here for the remainder of One Book Club.
And I'm
Hype,
super
hype,
excited to be here.
We're super glad to have you because especially like your best girl is from One, and it's like, well, we just it's just fitting. We gotta bring him on for that.
As
Absolutely.
far as heroines go, the thing I said that even made Lucci get the idea is that as far as the heroines go, One has my favorite key cast so far.
Oh, I can totally respect that. Like
Absolutely.
this is a galge when all said and done, and like to make a good galge, you gotta have a good heroine cast, and like a good galge literally lives and dies on a good heroine cast, and I think One being a galge made dang sure they got a good heroine cast. Whether or not you like the roots is a separate story, but God, I love these girls.
They're pretty amazing. Like, even the three we're going to talk about today, all three of these routes have some kind of controversy behind them in some way or another. But generally, the reception to the characters themselves has been pretty positive, including Mayu, and that did not used to be the case for her, which is really cool.
It's really cool, and also it makes me really happy for reasons that I'll talk about later, because we will definitely be talking a lot about Maya route, because there is a lot to discuss about her. Yeah.
All right. Do we just want to get into it? One thing we did not talk about last week is we didn't really talk about Mayu at all, because in the common route, she is completely avoidable. And this is like a trope that happened in key games up through Clanad, where there's always one heroine you can completely avoid, except it's skipped air. But we have Mayu, then later we had Mai, and we had Kotomi, who are just, you can completely skip meeting them. So actually meeting Mayu in the common route, like in the original one, was quite difficult. It took like 2 or 3 choices in a row to get correct to meet her, but luckily we have the hint system now, so it was not quite as hard.
You have to go through a secret passageway before even meeting her. You have to go to the secret passageway so that the player knows that the secret passageway exists first. What the fuck?
Yeah, it's not great design.
It's a series of very unconnected, kind of disconnected
things that seem completely
events
pointless
that tie in more directly to other heroines.
Exactly.
Yeah. Things that seem completely pointless aren't, but yeah. We will talk about Mayu soon, but to just bring an overall package on what we're doing. Today we will be talking about the 3 Maida routes of One. Now that's Mizuka, Mayu, and Nanase. All of these routes are generally the more controversial ones, which we'll get into later. But yeah, the main thing is that these are also the routes that I feel are the most connected to most of the common route, especially when it comes to Kohei as a character. Because Kohei, when it comes to some of the I'm blanking on his name here. What's his name? Hisaya routes. There's a bit of a gap between how this character acts, but with Maida route, it's there's more of you can see a more streamlined consistency of how this dude treats his heroines, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's that, and also all of the Maida routes more directly involve all of his characters besides Mayu.
Oh yeah. With the exception of Mayu, Mizuka and Nanase are probably the heroines you see the most in the game, in terms of common route.
Right. It's why, on my read of the original one, I opted to go for Nanase route first because just she was the heroine I spent the most time with and felt like I had gotten to know the most. Turns out that's not a great first route, but hey, it's okay.
You
In
live and
Nanase's
learn.
defense, I don't think her route completely works until you've finished everything, I think is the thing.
Might explain why I enjoyed it a lot more on the second read.
Yes, absolutely. That's part of what I had to think about after finishing one in general.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we'll get into this soon because we definitely didn't talk about that much in the last one. But one, you can probably confirm by now that there's some sort of like overarching mystery that all the routes share. There's like a structure to it all.
Yes.
So, assuming we've completed all 5 of the routes we have now, you can definitely see that all the things are generally similar. What happens in the routes are similar. The difference is mainly within the heroine and how Kohei forms a connection with the heroine. Because we'll get to that in the next episode, but the relationships in one are probably the most important things about this game. And the way they make those relationships will vary heavily depending on the route and heroine you are trying to romance.
Right.
So-
I'll just give a little warning here. This is a book club episode, which means we are going full spoilers on Mizuka, Nanase, and Mayu routes today. So make sure you've read all of those before coming here. Also, we will be expanding upon things we talked about last week with Mio and Misaki. So spoilers for those are fair game here as well.
Yes, should have clarified that, but that's very fair enough.
Yep.
All right, so shall
before we start getting into the details, though, there is one thing I wanted to bring up that wasn't quite addressed in the last episode. Out of all the technical enhancements and details of the remake, the one thing that didn't get mentioned was the remixed soundtrack.
I'm pretty sure we did mention it off contract, but yeah, everything about the soundtrack is just as perfect as everything else. Something I really appreciate about the soundtrack is the fact that they captured the soul of the original music, just made it modern.
It's a very faithful sort of remix. There's a few tracks where I'm a bit iffy on what they did, but I think most of them are at least on par. There's even a few tracks I actually prefer here compared to the original.
I think I just generally prefer the new soundtrack with the exception of 3 or 4. Unfortunately, one of them is Ame or Rain, which is my favorite track in the game. I don't love the new version of it. Something about the lack of reverb on the strings bothers me, but that's a nitpick, you know?
That's one of the tracks I actually prefer here.
In the remake, okay.
Yeah. Any track that involved piano, I think, was improved.
I generally just prefer the remake OST because it captures all of what I enjoyed about the original, but makes it more modern and has more depth to it, which is all I could ever ask for from a remake track. I just love this OST. It captures everything the original did just as well, but brings it up to modern standards, and I adore it.
Yeah.
In the YouTube versions of these episodes, you will hear a mix of the remake OST as well as 2 official arrange albums. For one from the past, Sea Roars, and the one piano album. I'm kind of mixing tracks from those 3 albums for the editing of this book club.
I didn't even know those arrange albums existed. You might have to throw those my way after this.
Oh yeah, I will definitely do that.
Glad I brought this up then.
Yeah.
All right. With that all being said, let's talk. I think it's finally time to talk about the individual heroines and the roots. So the first one we're going to be talking about is Mayu. And that's also just because we haven't really talked about Mayu much in the last episode because, as said, we don't really encounter her until now. Once you start on her route, that's pretty much how most people are going to meet her because she's completely avoidable. And most of her scenes are just... Yeah, there's something you have to try to aim to because it is... unlike canon where it's like there is like a missable point, but it's kind of easy to get. With Mayu,
my
you
route
straight up have
comes
to be
down.
ending.
My route comes down to a single choice. Mayu, you need to get 3.
Yeah, you need to get 3, and 2 of them you will have no idea that they are Mayu options.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
feel
not
so
very
arbitrary.
intuitive.
But at the least, once you really trigger her, you're not likely to miss her after that. She basically takes over the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once you get onto Mayu's route, you'll quickly learn that this is a character who is how do I say this?
Let's just talk about that. Let's just talk about that first impression. We have a girl who's dressed in like, very plain clothing that's too big for her. So she looks kind of unkempt. She's very sad. She has a dead ferret. She doesn't talk. And then as soon as you bury the thing, she starts wailing.
Yeah, she starts like crying really hard.
Really loud. Like,
Yeah.
She's just loud, this girl.
Yeah, so a lot of people's first impression, and this is mine as well, is, wow, you're acting like you're acting like a child. You don't feel like a heroine at all. Like, this is just a child. And I feel like the big elephant in the room, and that what a lot of people don't see, is that Mayu is a realistic depiction of a person who is who has difficulty with learning. Now, if you didn't know, Jin Maeda, the writer we all love, he majored psychology in his either university or in his studies. One of his studies. He majored psychology, so this man knows how people tick. And something that you will see very evidently in all of his routes is that this guy is more interested in challenging, in providing a realistic depiction in a piece of media to try and like make a character seem more, how do I say this? He doesn't hide anything. He is more interested in providing a realistic depiction of how someone would act rather than like a trope. He's not really interested in showing an anime trope in a way that's idealized.
Which I do like really appreciate in that way. And like we saw him do this a lot with Ikumi as well, like which was really his first story, and then coming back to do it here in a way that like now he has to mix the psychological realism with romance, and I would say he was generally not very successful at it. And this is one route where like it could really go either way for readers, depending on whether they can vibe with this character as a romance, and I am just like not in that boat.
Yeah, it really needs to be said. Mayu is, for all her issues, is not really written to have those seem charming at all. Like, she is very explicitly younger than the other characters in this cast, and she genuinely has a lot of issues that are issues that she doesn't really know how to deal with and is not getting help for.
Yeah. Like, something I do respect that they don't really mention is that they don't really bring too much attention to Mayu having a learning disorder. It's something you have to like pick up on if you're aware of, which I'm just gonna say it. There's a lot of hints, but I'm just gonna say it. Not enough people do this. Like in real life, I feel like learning disorders are more common to me than blindness or muteness. Yet less people pay attention to it than blindness or muteness. People are willing to give a lot of space to people who are to have some sort of physical disability, but people who have like a more mental disability, like a learning disorder, like perhaps autism as an example, people don't really give them the time of life. They don't really have as much patience for them, and they just aren't as aware that these issues exist. And this is something I feel like a lot of people don't know about Mayu until they are unless they're already experienced with these types of people, or if another person tells them, is that
Yeah,
Mayu
you
has
talking to
learning
other
disorder.
fans.
Yeah, like nothing in the actual game, like dialogue, really suggests it, but you can tell, like, or at least when you know when to look out for it, like, she is mostly nonverbal. She either only makes really small
She
grunts,
has
or
yeah
if she does speak, it's only really simple sentences.
yeah she has more trouble expressing herself in a different way to like Mio. Mio can't talk, but you can sense like a full, complete, cognizant mind behind this. Mayu is very, very much behind on that. She doesn't think as solidly as like Mio would. She needs help. She needs support, and the whole route essentially is about Kohei, Mizuka, and Nanase
Say
supporting this
very
girl
reluctantly.
very reluctantly, but she still ultimately does, is that these guys all meet Mayu and they decide we want to help her. And this includes Kohei, surprisingly, despite him being a super insensitive guy in some of the other routes we'll be talking about. He actually does try his best to care for Mayu from the very first time he actually meets her, because he sees himself in her. He relates to her. He understands that at we'll get to Kohei's character a bit more in the Mizuka discussion, but when he sees Mayu for the first time, he straight up says that he wants to be the person that he wish he could have had back when he was a kid, like someone that could help him basically be the Nagamori for him.
Yeah, pretty
So-
much immediately he
Yeah.
forms a connection with Mayu that isn't quite matched by the others.
Right, and we see this just in the simple fact that he's the one who actually gets the damn shovel out and buries Mew in the forest.
He does actually try, yeah, exactly. He tries to be nice to Mayu. Now, granted, he doesn't do a great job, but he does try. It's more than he can say about the other heroes.
And there is at least a reason for some of his less polite moments, because he thinks the correct approach is essentially to make her develop independence and not rely on them too much, even if they're there to support her.
Which I don't even think is necessarily the problem here. The problem I have with this route, which we can get deeper into later, is the fact that Kohei is inserting himself into a romantic relationship with her, which by definition is a relationship of equals. And these two are just not on equal playing fields socially, you know?
Yeah.
So it comes off as like he's taking advantage of her. And like it is significantly worse in the version of the game that has H scenes. I still think it's pretty bad here.
Yeah,
Let's not. I refuse to acknowledge those H scenes. That's like actually traumatizing for me.
we'll get to those issues like eventually, and that is most of my problem with this route as well. But I'll say, at the least, I don't think it's a huge element for the route, like as a whole. Like once that implication of a romance starts, you're already near the end of it, I feel.
Right, because this route is very back heavy. It's like the other big problem I have with it is that the pacing is just awful.
Yeah.
But before we can
about...
get to that, we've got plenty before that.
I do want to talk about the stuff that happens before that, because there's one thing that I feel like is really worth mentioning, and we did touch about it a bit, is that Kohei does have a very specific way of teaching Mayu, and that's the whole point of this route, is that we are helping Mayu not just because we care about her, but because we want her to be able to handle things herself. That is the goal. Mayu is, with the death of her friend, her ferret, she's trying her best to find her own ground and be able to like reliably live a life without the support of other people, because she's always needed that. Like without her friend, she's always had difficulty like doing anything, because if she ran into any like problems, she would just break down crying, like we see in her route. So what we have with her route is that we're trying to teach Mayu how to live her own life, and as we see, these characters have two very, very different approaches to how that's done. Neither, and this is something I will say, I don't think neither of them are correct. Like, what do you guys think about this?
I do generally agree with what Kohei tries to do, because it needs to be said, Mizuka does basically go like big sister mode for this entire route. Like from scene 1, she basically attaches herself to Mayu as, you know, someone she can always come to, and she does everything she can to support her, but she does kind of smother her. Like,
yes.
If she accompanies, one of the first important Mayu choices is whether to send her to the cafeteria alone or have Mizuka come with her. And if you send Mizuka with her, she lets Mayu buy like 12 hamburgers that she obviously cannot eat, and she doesn't even try to stop it because she can't like deny Mayu. And if you send her to the cafeteria with Mayu again on the next day, she does the same thing, despite knowing exactly what will happen.
Yeah. It's like I think that these two are basically just opposite extremes, and I think they're both wrong. I think if I had to choose between them, I would still prefer Kohei's approach to Mizuka's, but I don't think either of them are great, and I think the problem is just societal. You know, in the 90s in Japan, those schools just don't know how to deal with students like this. They don't have the resources in place to give Mayu the things she needs.
And Mayu isn't even going to school in the first place.
Right, like, and also the, you know, mom is clearly just uneducated on this.
I mean, a lot of people in Asia are to this day. Like, as I've said before, mental disabilities are very rarely talked about or brought awareness of, and especially in Asia, like it is generally just seen as like, oh, this person just needs to be like the rest, because that's how Asians see it. It's like we have to like do our best to blend into society and be normal per se, and that's just not how it's done here. And I will say, what Mizuka does in this route, it isn't the best solution, but something I will say is that it's accurate to her character. Now, we mentioned this in the past podcast. We didn't go into depth with it because we were going to talk about it here, and we will also go into this later on. But Mizuka is by nature a very caring person. Like, she is the person who will see someone in trouble, and her first instinct is help. We must help them. We must get them on their feet. That's just how she is. That's why she's been Kohei's friend for as long as she has. Because Kohei, as we've sort of like implied, is very much in the same boat as Mayu in that he needs help. Without any help, this dude cannot live on himself, and they say this right off the bat. This dude is like super incapable of taking care of himself. So with the help of Mizuka, he's able to function decently. And Mizuka, while her approach does work for Kohei, who can think for himself to a decent extent, it doesn't for Mayu.
Her approach is very different between the two of them. And like, shout outs to Iwami Monica on this. Like, she really got like both sides, like the more, you know, nurturing mother, as well as the more like hard ass motherly side, or Onesan type, whatever you want to call it. Her Seiyu like got them both down really well.
Oh yeah, I'd say like this is the route where the voice actor change improved things the most.
Yes.
Like, I never was quite convinced with Mizuka playing the big sister in the original version, but here she is so gentle sounding, so genuinely sweet.
He's always been this type of character, but she didn't always sound like this type of character. And that's what a good voice actor does. It's like it gives you an image of how these people are like. And Mizuka has always been the big sister, but people just don't see it. We've talked about this before, that her original voice, credit to her, she still did a pretty good job, but she sounded very Moe and very young, and it just didn't match the older sister image that these characters were like probably intended to have, especially during Mayu route.
Yeah, I definitely second that. Like her what's her name? Kimura Ayaka, who voiced her in the PC version, is probably my least favorite of the three. She's still good, but like even Izuka Mayumi, who voiced her in the PlayStation port, I preferred her over the original PC. But like, it's just another moment, and I've had so many throughout my entire read and will continue to throughout the entire book club, where I just like the new seiyus just sell the remake so well. I love the casting.
It is
like, really good casting.
It's possibly my favorite aspect of the remake, even over the art.
Yeah,
it is really good casting. There's just no other way to put it. That's just, yeah, they did an amazing job with them.
Either there were giant improvements to the voice performances, or they matched basically the exact same vibes as the original performances that made the characters work, like with Misaki.
Pretty much, I'd say so, yeah. But yeah, now we have we've gone through what's mainly happening, and as we've talked about it, Mizuka babies them too much, but I'm very much with Lucy in that Kohei has the opposite approach. Kohei tells Mayu to basically do things on her own. And while I definitely agree with the intent behind it, I don't think the depiction was very well done. Now, what I mean by that is when it comes to people with learning disorders, you need to definitely give them a chance to do things on their own. Because if they don't have hands-on experience, they're gonna not be able to take care of themselves. And this is also like, I speak from experience here because, fun fact, I have a slight learning disorder. It's not anything nearly as major as Mayu's, but I once had to go to a special special school to learn things on myself, how to socialize, how to talk to people. And to do that, you have to do activities that give you experience, because someone can tell you how to do something, but if you don't learn it yourself, that's not going to mean much. It's not going to register in your brain. Experience and really getting your hands on something and learning from those experiences are how you learn the best. And especially when it comes to people who are much slower than that, you have to just exercise patience and watch them slowly improve as they finally get the hang of something. And I feel like
basically you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yes, exactly. So one thing I do like about this depiction, though, is that we do not see Mayu instantly learn anything. It's very slow. And from what I've heard is that this is also a critique, is that it's a bit too tedious for some. That's the point. People with learning disabilities will take a lot of time to learn something, if they ever will. But I feel like it's important to stick with them because they're people too. Just because they need some more help than others doesn't mean they should be abandoned. And I feel like Mayu's depiction of her having very slow but definite gradual improvements is a good depiction that Maeda did. It's like Mayu, initially, she wandered into the classroom to find Mizuka and Kohei. Later, she waited outside because she knew that going inside was wrong. Even though she still ultimately came to the school, she didn't go in. She didn't break the rules. And I feel like that kind of depiction where she's slowly getting the hang of something and getting the idea in her head, that is a very, very important thing to keep in mind with these types of children is that they're not going to get something right away just because you tell them once. You have to tell them a lot of times, but you have to make sure that they are slowly getting the hang of it and make sure that your method that you're teaching them in is actually making some change. And I feel
now,
like Maya did a good job with that.
I'm a little more critical of this as a whole because, like, I do agree with everything you just said, but where it falls apart for me starts, like, near the end with the scene with the dog, and it's just, like, there was not a whole lot of setup for her to suddenly be able to do something that, like, big on her own, you know? Like, we saw, like, a little bit of improvement, and then suddenly she can just do whatever she needs. And then the epilogue, I understand that's a time skip, so I forgive that one a little bit more, but it kind of feels like we went from 1+1 to 2+2 to advanced calculus without a lot of in between. It's a pacing nightmare, and I understand that this is a one route. It's short, there was not a lot of time, but in this particular case, I just think it's like egregiously bad pacing.
Oh yeah, I'll have a lot to say about that when we officially get to that point, but let me say, as someone who is also on, as someone who is on the autism spectrum, but has, like, probably the most mild form of it, like, I can see, like, the situations Mayu gets in. Like, it needs to be said, even when, you know, Kohei's approach, which is usually more effective, is in play, like, it really doesn't always stick.
Right.
Like, if you send her to the cafeteria, you know, alone the first time, she cries in public because she seriously tries to buy 12 burgers again when she doesn't have the money and she just doesn't know what to do. Like, Kohei only gives her a very brief description of what to do. And the next day comes, she goes to the cafeteria alone again, and she runs into a different problem because it's still not completely clicking. She doesn't pick up things, like, very well, and even when it's being explained to her very directly, she can be stubborn, for lack of a better word. Like, she genuinely thinks no matter how many times she buys 10 burgers, she will not be able to eat them all, but she doesn't seem to get that.
Yeah, but that's just how it is with these people sometimes, and you have to give them the patience for them to learn and eventually get the hang of something. And I will agree, and we can start talking about the ending, well, not the ending, but, like, the lead up, that the second half of the route is very fast. Like,
it needs to be said, it's probably the biggest, like, time skip out of any of the routes. You go from very early January straight to like mid to late March, and you see almost nothing of Mayu in that time.
Yeah, there's like a huge gap of how these characters act are like shown, but I think this is more of a production thing, and I don't think that if the writers were given the time and the budget to actually do what they wanted, they would definitely not have a route this small. I'm like, because again, we have to mention this game, like the original game, was made in like a year, if not like shorter.
Less. November to June.
Yeah,
that was their development cycle.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, I get the critique, but I also get the poor Maida is probably like overworking himself to like get these routes done in a fashion, because God knows I wouldn't be able to write out something in 6 months.
I can sympathize with like development, problems affecting routes, but like I think in the end, you need to, like, when you're writing a route for a VN like this and you have these very certain restrictions and like obligations that each route is
you need to work your balance.
I don't think this route like works within this particular VN.
I feel like it is definitely it's definitely held back by its by what it has to do, and I feel like Maeda definitely. You can very much tell this in Maeda's routes, especially, is that he didn't get to do what he wanted to do. Like, he had a vision, but he was held back by, like, constraints of all kinds. And well, to be fair, this is something that will be repeated in other keywords, even like to this day with like a lot of the anime adaptations, or like no anime works, the anime original works. Maida's visions are just too big to put into a more constrained story.
Yeah, I would definitely agree to that. And like in this particular game, yeah, like I can equate the pacing problems to that. It doesn't save the other issues for me, which we can get into when you guys are good to
it
move
doesn't
on.
change the final result.
Let's get into the elephant in the room. Okay, so this is a galgame, and in a galgame, you romance heroines. You have to make the lovey stuff, and Mayu is not very much that. She's not that type of character. I don't think a lot of people find pleasure in romancing a child.
She is not mentally mature enough for romance.
Yeah.
Like I am just saying it, and I think that Kohei, like, okay, you could have made this cute where like you're taking Mayu on a date, because like just as a cute little thing to teach her how she should act, you know? Like, we see Yuichi do something like this with Makoto, and, like, H scene in that game aside, it's very tasteful. Here it's not, because Kohei is, like, making all kinds of weird... Yeah, he's an idiot. He makes all kinds of weird comments. Like, the one that really, like, just... It gave me the heebie-jeebies is when he says to the waitress in the restaurant that, oh, she's not my little sister, she's my girlfriend. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I get the logic during... Okay, this is taking place during Christmas Eve, of course, and his logic is that he doesn't want it to just be like a night of like two basically siblings
this is also something that's like sort of cultural, is that Christmas in Japan is very much not Christmas in the West as you guys see it.
Right.
This is also something with Asia as well. It is seen as a lover's night. It is seen as like Valentine's. You do this, you go out with your special someone and you go and spend time together. That's what it's seen as. It's not seen as something to be with your family. New Year's is our holiday where we get to spend time with our family. So when it comes to Christmas, we have a very different culture with it. So. Yeah, Golden Week too, but yeah, Christmas has a very different connotation in Japan. So that's also like something that's like, I get the idea behind it, but even then, it is very weird that Kohei is trying to romance Mayu, and Mayu, they just did not have that kind of relationship before that. Even like Kohei is like, this is a bit off for me, but I'm gonna roll with it because I've decided to do this, and this is just something that Kohei's always done. He's an idiot, like especially in the Mayada routes, he doesn't really think things through. He's just an idiot. That's plain and simple. He's dumb.
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't even know like Christmas held that kind of significance in Japan, so that does definitely add a dimension to how I see it. But
well, yeah, now you know, because I can say because it's very much the same way in Hong Kong too. But yeah, that's like how it is, and also like the same connotations to it. Does it make this relationship good? No. I will say, yeah, go ahead.
Like, what does make it extra uncomfortable is, at least on Christmas, I do think he's not entirely serious about it, because, you know, like I said, he basically starts the quote-unquote relationship because he just thinks it would make things a bit more festive. And he decides afterwards to keep it going because him calling Mayu his girlfriend in front of her causes her to calm down after causing an incident in a restaurant. He figures if it's helping her, like, pull herself together, he may as well keep that quote-unquote relationship going. It's still not entirely there, but, like, there's a logic to it that isn't completely romantic.
There's definitely a logic, but it is, boy, is it forced.
It's what it becomes after that.
Yeah.
That just, it feels uncomfortable, yeah.
Yeah. Like, also, like, I will say, And Mayu is not able to take care of herself. But Kohei is equally as much of an idiot because this guy's going to a 5-star restaurant, ordering steak for Mayu of all people, when, as we later see, she is perfectly happy with chomping on a hamburger. It's just like, dude, what are you doing? Like Mayu, this is not just like a problem that Mayu has with like her quote unquote ruining a date. Kohei is like the worst date planner of all time because this dude just does not know how to do something that is like helpful for his partner. Because like he basically does this all on a whim for himself. And also to like help Mayu get that experience, but also it's like partially for himself. It's like, why would you go to a steak place when she probably doesn't know how to eat a steak? She's never had a steak.
She doesn't even know how to cut it up.
Or Nanase's clothes. Like, I feel so much for her. Like,
she suffers so much in this route. Every time Mayu sees her, she tugs on her pigtails.
And yet she still buys her all those hamburgers at the big touching goodbye scene when you realize that Nanase is actually a really sweet person.
If you haven't read Nanase route yet, I feel there are a couple characters here where you can't really like them unless you read their routes and see what their full deals are. But Nanase, I think, is one of them, but if you haven't read her route before, this route is the one where you really start seeing how she is underneath, like,
he's really kind, yeah.
When you see the Dere side, like...
Yeah. Poor Nanase, but yeah, also, the other elephant in the room. The HCs are gone, and I don't know about you, but that was the biggest part for me. I hated... I want to erase those memories so badly from my brain.
I'll be real, I still hate what it was replaced with this time.
I am so grateful that by the time I read the original one, there was a quote-unquote AA patch that just grayed out all the HCGs.
So you didn't have to look at it, even though you still had to read it.
I didn't even read it. I skipped through it until I was safe.
Yeah,
but
understandable.
The implication alone was still enough to make me horribly uncomfortable. And I don't think what it was replaced with is like very comfortable or sweet either, but it's not on the same level.
I'm personally a lot more like fine with it because like as we said before, all of the H scenes were replaced with hug scenes. And you know what? Mayu might be underdeveloped, but I will 1000% take a hug than whatever the fuck happened in the original.
Well, it's still just the CG in the remake where it looks like he's pinning her down on the bed.
He's literally doing that, and it's creepy.
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I
don't like it.
And it goes by so quick. It's like you can almost tell you're missing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. You can't really was that even in the original?
I don't remember. I blocked it out of my memory too.
There are definitely some CGs in the original, so I guess they had to recreate those. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, that's like the worst part. Like everyone can agree that is the worst part of the route. No one likes it. I don't know a single person that likes it, and I hope I don't meet someone that likes it because Jesus Christ. Okay, so now we get to the.
I'm just saying. Even after that, we get to the other, probably controversial part of the route. I will say this part of the route, the ending part where Mayu, for context, even though we've probably all read this route, Mayu is in the rain. It starts raining, and she finds a lost dog, and Kohei decides this is like the final test of strength. Let's see if Mayu can take care of herself. So Mayu sets out on her own to help the lost dog and find their owner. It's not just that she sets out. He deliberately like slips away from her, like without telling her anything, to see how she would react.
Yeah.
At that.
Yeah, it is like, for him, it's like the final test because he's about to disappear and he knows he's literally about to disappear. This is like the the climax, and that's like like even though Kohei wants to, he literally can't teach her anymore because he's about to go to the fun place. So because of this, we have this scene where Mayu is frantically searching through the rain to return the dog to its owner. And Lucy and Scout have said this before, but this is like really detached from anything Mayu has ever done before. Like it is a huge gap.
Like we need to reestablish the last we see of Mayu before like this climax. She's still crying in public, like making a mess of herself. We see, and the most growth we really see of her is her waiting outside the school to meet with Kohei and Mizuka instead of running into the school. Yeah. And again, this is a huge time skip, so we do not see in my opinion, we do not see nearly enough of Mayu, especially past the relationship confirmation to really even believe this.
Yeah. Now, I will say, even though it is really rushed, I personally really love this scene. And this is just for me, I feel like this is really inspiring to people who have difficulties with learning disabilities or like cognition problems with their cognition. Because yes, it is rushed, but ultimately what this route is trying to tell its viewers that it is possible for people to grow and these people to overcome their issues and be capable. Because if you choose to make Mayu grow on her own and do all the right decisions, she gets to try things out on her own. She gets to go out and experiment, do her best. She might not always succeed, but you can give her the option to try instead of baby her. If you do that, she'll be able to do it on her own, and she'll be able to take care of herself, and she successfully finds the dog's owners in the rain, which is, granted, a very troubling thing to do. This is something not normal people would normally do. When you see a crying dog in the rain, most people would just like look away or go back with their own business because, hey, it's raining. Mayu doesn't have an umbrella. She's soaking wet, but she pushes through for the sake of another living being, and ultimately brings the dog and its owner a lot of happiness. Like, no, the execution isn't good. I will say it is very rushed, but I feel like what the event represents and the message it's trying to push is very, very heartwarming, and it's very much what makes the route for me. Is that even in spite of the fact that you might have these struggles when learning, anyone can learn and anyone can overcome themselves. It's very much possible to become a stronger person and be able to bring others happiness. Mayu no longer needs other people. She reached her goal, which was to become a capable person that can take care of herself. And she does stumble later. Like, it's not a perfect, she's now perfectly capable. She's still got learning disabilities, but she can at least somewhat handle herself on a level that was way better than anything she could ever do in the past. And I feel like that's
this throughout the epilogue as well, when she's like starting to, make friends and talk to them about Kohei and stuff like that.
Yeah, she has
the journal was really good.
I'll grant, I like what the epilogue does, like giving us a much more direct look into how she thinks and like what she's trying to do after all that.
Right, like the actual message behind the route is really good. It's just specifically the scene with the dog is just not set up. So it kind of feels jarring, like from a story perspective. But like once you get into the journal, it becomes a lot more understandable, since that is like a passage of time. Like that's what a journal really represents, is that you see a little snapshot as Mayu goes through her time on her own without Kohei remembering the things that she learned from him.
Yeah, like I respect the intent behind this round, the message a lot, like especially for something from like what 1998.
Yeah,
like it's novel in its own right, and I respect Mayu as a depiction of like, you know, this kind of character that isn't really exaggerated or tried to make.
Yeah, I said this
charming.
I said this when I finished the route. I don't like this route, but Mayu herself is not the problem.
Nah, like I think the biggest problem with Mayu is she's just not like, she doesn't fit as a heroine compared to the rest. Like I already said, I don't think this route works within this particular VN. Like the romance, like the very sudden like climax, and especially how it handles the eternal world. Like as far as that goes, this is the worst route you could read first. But compared to Nanase, like almost nobody runs into that. But like it is so jarringly, like there's no foreshadowing or build up to it throughout the route. And when the sequence, the Mizuka's backstory starts up, unlike every other route, it's the middle of like a clear day with a blue sky instead of the very distinctive red sunset. Like they genuinely couldn't find any other place to insert it.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Oh yeah, like especially as
Yeah,
someone
that's
who
weird.
like started with Misaki's route, where everywhere like red sunsets are a theme throughout that route. It makes that backstory
That's just
very
Hisaya. Like he puts like he loves his sunset symbolism and he puts it in everything. Like
He does that in canon too.
oh yeah.
he does it a lot in canon. He does it a little bit in Sora no Method as well.
Like that.
I don't remember if he does in Sola, but yeah, it's definitely just a.
I don't remember it
Hisaya
in
thing.
Sola.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sunset theming in Misaki's route is part of why I personally say it's the best route to start with as far as how the Eternal World plot is presented, because having that familiar symbol that's like you're used to and holds a lot of significance throughout this route suddenly means something completely different is like, it grabs your attention so hard. It unnerved me a lot on my first read through.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then this route comes and throws out like that common element. So yeah, I'll sum up Mayu's route as it feels like it should be a side route in some other VN. I think if it was like that, it would be a much better route, whether it got more time or just because it didn't have to fulfill the obligations that comes with being a one route.
Yeah, I can get behind that for sure. Manpig, do you have anything else to add, or can we get into ratings?
Yeah, I pretty much want to say what I have with my ratings, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it. I think Scout and I will go first, though, because I think yours is the most positive of ours. I gave this route a 6. It's my least favorite route in this game by a little bit. Mostly because I just do not like the romance in this route. And I think in a Galgame, having a romance that's just this uncomfortable is a pretty big blunder for me.
For me, I'd give it like a 5, because I think I wasn't a giant fan of most of the route even before the climax, but I think most of it is okay to decent. But once you hit Christmas, it just falls apart to me. Like,
yeah,
it feels like the climax happens right when it should be starting in earnest.
Can get that, but like as I said, for me, I feel like a lot of the differences in what will make or break this route is whether or not you're inspired by it. And ultimately, for me, when it comes to story, what I look for the most is the message and the emotions and relatability I have during that scene. I don't yes, it might not have been necessarily sold to everyone, but for me, watching Mayu's growth was something that I was personally very invested in. And when I first came to this route, I I didn't know what I was getting into, so I was very confused, and I didn't really enjoy myself. But on a reread once I like had the whole story in mind, I looked back on it and I understood what they were going with. Seeing it again under those eyes gave me a lot of appreciation for this route. On a reread, this is like the route that changed by far the most for me. Like I went from giving this route like a 6 to like absolutely loving this route on a reread because I struggle with learning disabilities, even though they're not nearly as major as Mayu's. I've been through the things that Mayu has gone through, and I know people because I've attended a special needs school, and there are people who are in that school, and also people who I've seen who struggle with these things that have things pretty much on the same tier as Mayu. Like Mayu is not
someone in my own family, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, this is a very real issue that real people are facing. And people need to be aware that these people exist and need support. We cannot abandon these people.
Right.
So it's not the most well-rounded depiction, but I am very happy that one bothered to have a depiction of a heroine with a mental disability and also still do their best to give an inspiring message, because that is something that we really need and really need more awareness of, is that people like Mayu are worth it. This is like the whole theme of one, is that people are worth giving empathy to and supporting. Having the bond with them will pay off in the long run. Like, no, the romance isn't very well done, but having that bond with Mayu, in that seeing that even Mayu is someone that can have you can have a strong bond with someone like Mayu, and even Mayu will remember you so much that you'll be able to come back from the eternal world. I personally really appreciate this route, and seeing Mayu's growth ultimately just made me really fall in love with her character, and ultimately I gave it a 9 because I was just on a reread and with recontextualization. I just really appreciated everything that this character has gone through, and I'm very proud of how far she's gone. I do agree that in a different game, maybe a character like Mayu would be given the more patience and a more well-rounded route that has a more focus on that. But sadly, that isn't here or there. But what we got, I'm not too disappointed with. I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I'm glad there was some defense for this route because it is one of the controversial ones. So thanks for that, Manpig, for real.
Yeah, I even if I don't necessarily agree with liking this route, I do think it deserves some defense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There are a lot of Mayu fans. Like, if you like this route, don't feel alone. Like, there are a lot of Mayu fans. It's just like a lot of things in one, it's split.
Shout outs to Utori, our main host, is a pretty big Mayu fan, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Mayu has fans. Like, it's just people will have their own opinions, and especially with one, we'll have very split opinions. And speaking of those, let's talk
about Mizuka.
Speaking of that need a defense.
Okay. Yes, so the main heroine of this game, Mizuka Nagamori. She is the first heroine you meet. She is the one you spend by far the most time with.
She's the cover girl.
She is the cover girl. And oh boy, does she have a root.
Oh yeah.
Now, we will have to go back to what I said about Mayu's route in the Mizuka route, in that Maeda is not his goal in this game was clearly not to necessarily make a realistic or tropey story. He was trying to break the mold with realistic depictions. And I would argue he didn't really succeed with this until Air. And you really see this in the Nagamori route, because oh boy, how do we unpack this? How do we even begin?
Well, like, I think the thing really to start with here, we already, like, shouted out her Seiyu, but, like, the biggest thing to, like, that became way more obvious in the remake, even though it was in the original, is that Mizuka is not a pushover. She does not just put up with Kohei's crap. She's loving in a way that is, you know, almost like a tough love. And, like, she'll go to his house to wake him up in the morning, but she'll do it by yanking the covers off of him. You know, this is just the kind of character that Mizuka is, and it's like, honestly, I respect so much that Kohei is grateful for it. This is the only positive thing I have to say about Kohei in this round.
That's very much fair. Yeah, so Nagamori is the childhood friend, and she does care for Kohei. As we've said, she's been caring for Kohei for a very long time. Without her, he wouldn't be able to take care of himself. And he even says this in his bios that without her, where would he be? He doesn't even know himself. She is literally the reason he's been able to like keep himself together. And so what happens if you take that really essential part of his life and flip it on its head?
Yeah, I want to try to, like, neutrally describe Kohei, like, at the beginning of this route, just because I think it is important to keep in mind. Kohei, as we've probably said before, is not a very good person at the start of one. And he does grow in some way throughout every route, whether it's meeting Mayu and finding someone that he can relate to and decides he wants to help, or, you know, in Misaki's route, where he just finds someone he respects a ton and genuinely cares for to the point he can barely be truly mean to her. But Kohei in this route is someone who has not taken any of those roads that would have led him to grow. He is someone who has essentially stuck with the normal, everyday, seemingly endless routine of his life up to this point. And suddenly, for something that is just a joke to him, it's suddenly changed in a way that he is not comfortable with.
Yeah, like, this is, okay. I don't know how many people listening to this have actually, like, gone through something like this, but it is, like, semi-normal to ask somebody out on a dare or because you lose a bet. That kind of thing actually does happen. It very rarely ends with the person actually saying yes, and even still, like, have the courtesy, if you're not into it, to, like, get yourself back out of it. But at that point, he kind of felt like there was no way out, you know? And this, like, oh boy, Manpig, you have a whole thing with the tips in this route with the hint system. And, like, I don't know if you want to talk about that yet, but I definitely want you to point it out on this episode.
I definitely want to talk about this now. So this is something I have told everyone during the podcast, and this is something that was very much intentional during the original one, because, again, the remake of 1 has a hint system, but it is very, very clear that this route was not written with those hints in mind, because something you might notice if you do pick the hint is that, hey, why are all the correct answers the ones where Kohei is an absolute jackass? There's no better way to put it. He's just a terrible, horrible person. Like, oh my god. But this is, again, something that needs to be put into context. Most people, when they play a game like this, they do not have the hint system. The people in the 90s, they didn't have the hint system. They were trying to figure this out. And most people who want to romance their girls, be nice to them. But as we know from this situation, Kohei doesn't.
That's not
really
the correct answer in this case. Yeah.
It's not the correct answer. And while you can definitely put them, you can do that. You can make those decisions, it leads to the bad end, and it ends up with Kohei going to the eternal world. Why is this? This is like something that's really important context to this route that basically wholly it doesn't justify it. I will never say it justifies it, but it explains it, sort of like gives some sort of logic to the chaos as to why Kohei would ever do stuff like this. Is that this dude has clear depression. Like or if not depression, he's definitely like has a disconnect from the world. And there's something that you can definitely get the impression of once you get to the Misao scenes. Like we've talked about this before in the last episode, but this is the route where I feel like we really need to touch on it. Losing Misao literally ruined this man. Like this boy has not felt any form of passion in his heart in years, and that's also why this dude can be so terrible to the people around him, is that he doesn't feel like what he's doing has consequences, because he doesn't feel like anything's worth it. Why bother connecting with people? Why bother to have these relationships? Why bother to put effort into it when it doesn't mean anything, when I'm gonna lose them all eventually? Like, this is something that has very clearly affected this person ever since his childhood, and he's never grown out of it. He was a bit of a prankster back when he had his little sister, but you could tell when his sister needed him, he tried his damn best to care for her, to keep her happy. And when that ultimately resulted in nothing, Kohei just never did that again. And that's exactly the problem here, is that when you are kind to Nagamori in this route, none of that is genuine. Kohei says that he loves Nagamori, but in his heart he never once means it. He's always like half-hearted with his situation.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, when you go down the nice path, especially from the start, and you essentially get locked into it, it sort of culminates in a scene where he talks with Nagamori over what the issue he might be having is, and he comes to the conclusion that he's bothered by their status as a couple and how visible it is, and his solution is to just keep treating her like he did before, to basically act like nothing changed. So technically, yes, he's treating her better than he did in the alternative, but it's not genuine on his half. He does not feel the same way she does towards him.
He is leading her on in that case. Like, in the way, this is really a no-win situation.
And I don't think he's wrong at all to be as upset with it as he is. Because again, his pretty much the only life he could, safely lead has suddenly been changed over something he thought was harmless.
Yeah, this guy doesn't take anything seriously, and he doesn't like change. He's never been someone who is receptive to change, and he very much reacts negatively to that change in relationship, because like Nagamori ultimately accepts his confession, but that's also because like she does ultimately care for him. Whether that's
for the record, Kohei didn't take seriously. Like
he didn't take
like
seriously
y'all
at
were
all.
saying.
Yeah, but Nagamori definitely did, and that was like the big issue, is that Kohei just wasn't comfortable with it, and you can make a relationship like this happen, but if you're it's not gonna mean anything. And ultimately, with his half-hearted responses, all that it culminates in is an ungenuine relationship and him getting forgotten by everyone. He just goes to the eternal world, and nothing is resolved. You get the bad end. So obviously, the solution to this is just to be a piece of shit.
I got the bad end 3 times on my first read before I figured out what the actual right answer was and how I was supposed to act. It was actually really interesting to play it without the hint system, or before it existed in the original one. And I do agree with you that the hint system does make this significantly worse. However, I do think just getting the bad end on purpose once will suffice just fine for this route.
You need this context. I can tell you about it now because we've completed the game. But people who complete the Nagamori route, who keep the hint system on, will have no idea what they're will have no idea about the context of this and miss such important character building and like. It gives again order to the chaos. You get a reason to why this character does what he does, and what he does is let's just talk about it. He crosses the line. He absolutely just crosses the line. This dude does quite literally the worst things you could possibly ever do to your girlfriend, and it is shocking that Nagamori doesn't like resent him for it. I'm like. Bruh, you did not need to go to this far. This is like the biggest problem about this route for me. Anything related to like that touchy scene did not need to happen. You got the point across fine enough, perfectly fine enough without that scene. Why did you have to go like that?
Well, I think it kind of makes it worse that she stays with him after that. Like, it kind of made the entire second half of the route just make me feel really icky because, like, I think Nagamori as a character should have more self-respect than that. Like, there's this scene that they have, like, where they're gonna dance or something right after, where, like, there's the whole forgiveness, and it's supposed to be really sweet, and in my case, it just made me angrier.
I genuinely liked Nagamori less as a character when I first read this route because of her forgiving him like that.
Yeah.
Like, all that, you know, her original Seiyu making her sound like a pushover, and then this, like, basically confirming it to me at the time.
Yeah. Okay.
The painful thing about this route isn't just that you have to act like a jerk. It's that you cannot try to be reasonable even once. Like,
yeah.
If you try to...
That you get rewarded for acting like an asshole.
Yes, and he is so ridiculously petty in the ways he does it, too. Like, there's a scene where he's in a hallway with her, and she's, you know, going on about how he's a mess without her around, which is completely true, and he explodes at her and accuses her of being the reason for that because she does everything for him without giving him a chance. And that's not true at all. And as we see further along, he doesn't even believe that. It's just complete spite.
Yeah. It's not great. And but I do have some defenses of this, and I do have some like complicated thoughts. I'm just trying to pull up my review because oh my god, it's so behind on everything. Jesus Christ. Here's what I have to say about all. I mean, has everyone said what they want to say about this? Just right off the bat.
More or less, I'd say.
Okay.
I have as well. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm gonna go off here. The big thing about this route again is that, unlike other routes where Kohei is... The other routes follow the typical visual novel formula. Kohei meets a heroine, the heroine has a problem, and Kohei fixes the problem. That's how it goes in every other route. Mizuka is the one exception, and also something that like is completely flipped on its head because she's the cover girl. I guess the idea was to do something a bit different with her. And the different thing with her is that unlike other heroines where the heroines have a main problem and Kohei helps him, it's the other way around here. Mizuka has no issues. At least as far as a person goes, she's perfectly happy with her own life, and she's probably, aside from being like tied to Kohei, she's probably the healthiest outside of like Mio, that of like who in terms of like how she can take care of herself and how she views herself. She's more of the opposite type. She's someone who looks out for other people, and because she's so capable for herself that she spends her time in and her main personality trait is that she's caring of other people. She cares for Kohei, she cares for Mayu, she's looking out for other people. That's just how Mizuka is. And the thing about Kohei is that, yes, Kohei is a dick, and he's absolutely unforgivable. However, there are a lot of people I know who struggle with mental health that because of their struggles with mental health, they end up harmful to those around them and they don't even realize it. And Kohei definitely he's cognizant of it to an extent, but he's not able to fix his own bad habits because of how he feels inside. It's just he can't stop himself. And I hate to say it, but with a lot of people with like these types of personality issues, that is an accurate depiction of how some people act this way, especially if they're struggling with something. They lash out. They are very impulsive. They sometimes say things that they don't mean to, and tragically, that's just how some of these people are. Kohei having this struggle, it is brushed under the rug in basically every other route except Mizuka route. However, in Mizuka route, we see this in full blast. This is Kohei with the band-aid ripped off. There's nothing hiding anymore. This is just him bare naked with his emotions and how he acts. And I will say, the route is very clumsy in how it depicts Mizuka's relationship with him, is that Mizuka is eternally forgiving. However, what I do think is important to take a look at is more, again, the message the Mizuka route is trying to give rather than the execution. Because again, I think we can all agree the execution is pretty terrible.
Yeah.
But what Mizuka does ultimately is, in spite of everything he's done, he's even acknowledged it himself that he is the lowest of the low. He is a terrible person. He should not be forgiven. Mizuka still forgives him. And I bet everyone's like going, why would you ever do this? This is just out of character. This is not how anyone should ever act to anyone that treats them this way. And I'd agree, you're right. But in a fictional world, what you want isn't always going to be the most realistic depiction. Again, this is something that kind of goes against what Maeda does, but you sometimes want something that's idealized. Wouldn't it be better if everyone was able to just forgive themselves about all their problems and just work together to help each other? Because everyone's struggling. Everyone has these issues. Not everyone is as bad as Kohei, and absolutely, some people should be very much punished for things that they do, but in a better world, I don't want to see people like hurting each other because of things of being hurt in the past. Wouldn't it be much better for everyone to reach not necessarily forgiveness, but an understanding, some sort of like respect for each other? And again, I do think this route handles it very clumsily, but that is what happens with Kohei. Ultimately, while Mizuka he knows he hurt Mizuka, but Mizuka is able to forgive him in spite of all that. And because she's able to do that, Kohei is eventually able to look at himself and go, okay, this is how I am. I need to change myself. And now I'm going to do my damn best to be a better person. This time I'm going to actually commit to this relationship and mean it. I'm going to change myself to become a better person. And that is something you have to do. This is something we've done in one before. To do something, you have to choose to be a better person. The choice needs to happen. And I do think we did need to have like an extra choice during that bubble blowing scene with the fountain, that Kohei needs to have chose to fix himself. It's something that needs to have been actively from him. But we do at least see it, that after this horrible, horrible blunder, Kohei slowly decides to pick himself back up. And it is probably like it is ultimately something that does happen through this route in a way that is fully focused on him. He doesn't have to connect with anyone in a way that has him change as a byproduct. The story from beginning to end is focused on Kohei and his own change. And I feel like that is the basic idea of the route. and what it's trying to aim is that Kohei is someone who is very harmful to those around him. People with these struggles will be harmful to those around them. They'll be very petty. They can be very impatient. They can be just really, really difficult to be friends with sometimes. Like sometimes as a friend, you might ask yourself, why did I become friends with this person when right now they're they're a burden. But ultimately, people like this, we shouldn't abandon. No matter how far gone, Nagamori will always be there for Kohei, and she'll always look out for him. And I do feel like even though, despite the execution, this message is very important because you shouldn't forget your humanity. No matter what happens, people are people, and some people do deserve help. They do deserve some support. And while Kohei definitely isn't as forgivable as Mayu, I don't think it's worth saying he doesn't deserve support. Because if someone is truly going through some like problems and like mental health issues, the only people that can pull him out are those he cares for. At least that's my opinion of it.
No, I really like that. And one thing that I can, definitely second in what you said is like, here's how I can say it. If this scene did not exist, I would adore the second half of this route. Because watching Kohei actually start trying hard to pick himself back up and still falling short when falling into the eternal world is a really well done depiction. And one of my favorite things about the route is that you can keep trying and it can sometimes not be enough because depression doesn't just go away. Kohei is still coping with the loss that he feels from Misao, and even though he is finally deciding to form this bond with Mizuka, it's not always going to be enough to keep him tethered to the real world right away. One thing that I talked about last week that actually kind of upset me, and it was really obvious in Misaki route, is that Kohei doesn't try hard enough to keep his connections. This was definitely the case with Mizuka, but when I reread this route, I kind of understood more why that was the case, and it's that he is in some ways afraid of that bond.
It's again, he lost his most precious person, his little sister, at a young age, and despite how hard he tried, she still left him. So after such a loss, this dude is just what's the point? What is the point of these relationships if I'm gonna lose him eventually? And as one of my favorites, and this is another story that I really love, stated, you're gonna lose everything one day. That's exactly why you should treasure what you have while you still have it. And I do feel like Mizuka's route, even though very clumsy, does reflect this, is that he does try to improve himself. And this is something a lot of people, again, don't agree with me on this, but despite my heavy issue with the first half, I personally really like the second half because, again, we do see Kohei trying his best to make that change. He does choose to become a better person. He doesn't choose to stagnate. This time he's actively trying to change himself. He's trying to get over what he's done before and all the sins that he's committed. He's trying his best to become someone that can care for the person he loves, which is Mizuka. Because ultimately he does care for Mizuka.
I think if they didn't take that one particular sin at the night of the school 10 steps too far, this could have been one of the best routes in the game.
Oh, I can fully agree with you there. That is
that one scene is the problem.
It is something I don't think anyone can or should defend because I'm just gonna say it, sexual assault is a horrible, horrible thing to do. It is something that you should never take lightly, and it is not something that people should ever look lightly. I do not think this route needed this at all. This is too much. It is
there were ways
Something that
to make
very much-
Kohei an asshole, like, and hit a bottom that he could then come back from without going this far. And I think the route could have been amazing if they had just done that. But as we know, that's not what happened. And so we're kind of, like you said, stuck with this very clumsy execution of a story that I don't know that Maida necessarily intended for it to be taken this way.
This is how I would change it. I would just change it to a really, really, really bad breakup. Like a breakup where Kohei just lashes out completely. He just starts yelling at Nagamori and venting all of his frustrations, even he doesn't really mean it. He's just going wild, and then he runs away. That's how I would do it.
Side note, there's a later key work that does that extremely well.
Yep. And it's just like a proof of concept. It's like something that's it was done really early on.
Yeah.
And it's this is
which key work does that Clanad. But I won't say which route. But there's a route in Clanad. Yeah, that kind of does the same thing. In that they need to hit a rock bottom that they can then pick themselves up from, but it's just done. Even though I still don't like that route, it's done much more tastefully in Clanad than it is in 1.
Yeah, and I do think that is the biggest blemish of 1 is that the thing that has by far aged poorly, because back in the 90s, I'm just gonna say it, this kind of event in a lot of adult media is way more common than it should be.
Yeah, it's a product of the times that it really is just not aged well.
Yeah, especially I really feel like they should have changed this for 2023, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
However,
I'm pretty sure the original version goes into at least a bit more detail over what's happening to her during that scene.
It's pretty much unchanged. I remember it pretty well.
You did the comparison.
If I'm wrong, please correct me. But as far as I remember,
it's not extreme, but it makes it a bit more clear, what is happening to her in that moment. I'm pretty sure, but my memory is a bit hazy at this point.
I remember it being pretty much identical, but I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm not. But yeah. Anyways,
I won't say either way. It's been too long since I read the OG.
It has been quite a while, but yeah, that's the elephant in the room. That's the discussion. Don't commit sexual assault. It's not okay. That's just that's the moral. That is the moral of the lesson. That is a one line that you should never cross. It is pretty much second to murder. Don't do it.
Yeah.
I have over 1,200 screenshots from the original one, and of all things, I didn't catalog what happened there.
I mean, I don't blame you. That's not something I would want to screenshot.
I don't want to remember that. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Anyway, greener pastures. Okay, so once you get past the worst scene in existence, you get a scene where Kohei is now trying his best to change himself. And as Lucci said, it's not instant. He has struggles, but he eventually picks himself back up, and eventually and slowly, he does ultimately become a better person. He hangs out with Nagamori. Their relationship is somewhat similar to what it used to be, but they're still a bit more romantic, and he's even willing to take those steps and hold her hand and stuff. He's no longer passive. He actually is trying to make Nagamori happy, and he's taking those extra steps himself, which is really it is such a big breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it's it took a lot to get there, but once we actually get there, we get a pretty good version of Kohei. And unfortunately, I just don't have much to say about this part, except that I think the romance is actually really sweet.
The romance is really sweet once you detach it from what came before. I would agree with that.
Exactly. I would have liked to just have the second half of this route in isolation. Or at the very least, like we were saying before, just changed that scene. And then this would have felt a lot more tasteful. Here's what I want to ask about the second half of this route, and this kind of gets into Eternal World stuff, so feel free to defer me to next week if what I'm asking is too deep. Do we think Mizuka is the Eternal World girl?
I don't think it's too deep for here because like the things that we'll discuss with the Eternal World in next session does not particulate to this.
I was thinking that as well. That's why I wanted to bring it up here because like it is something that like has been debated a lot in the One community since like long before the remake. And I
understandably so.
I don't know.
There's like two ways I can even interpret that question.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even sure which way you mean it in that sense.
I think okay, here's my personal take. Because this is something that Maida has stated before, is that he kept things vague so the readers can come to their own conclusion and make their own theories. That's like part of what makes the story special, is like you can think about it, but you won't get a solid answer. There are some people who think that Mizuka is his, that image of Mizuka is his sister. Personally, the way I see it is that the way I saw it is that it is a version of the Eternal World, like the very essence of the Eternal World itself as a spirit, but it's talking to Kohei through an image of Mizuka, because Mizuka was the Mizuka we see is the Mizuka Kohei met as a very young child when he was recovering from his trauma with his little sister, is that age.
Right.
So the Eternal World takes that image of him because it's the first thing he's like sort of imprinted on since that depression stage. Now,
I think my interpretation is something that will have to wait for next episode, because I have a few very particular things about the interpretation of the Eternal World and what it represents at specific times that I want to get into, but there is one thing I'm a bit unsure about, and that's the timeline of when the promise of eternity happened, because the initial backstory Kohei gives between the two of them is that Mizuka was basically just throwing rocks at his window to get his attention. One of them hit him by accident, and he folded up by bullying her for a long time, but they eventually slowly became genuine friends, which is something, the absurdity of which he reflects on very early into the common route. I'm not entirely sure when the promise that goes on between them was supposed to happen there, though.
I didn't even consider that.
Like, I can probably pretty safely assume it was the point where they actually start turning their relationship together, like, for the better. But it's a bit vague when I think about it.
Nay in chat says, doesn't he also kind of mix up Nagamori with his sister sometime in the beginning?
I don't remember that.
I believe it's an offhand comment about them taking baths as kids.
I genuinely don't remember that, but if that's correct,
I remember that
conversation,
but like,
yeah.
I'm willing to chalk it down to him being Kohei.
I am too, and that's like one cool thing that Maida does with this character is that he's not super reliable. Like, we have he's not the most like unreliable MC we've had.
I would argue he's up there.
He's up there.
Because it's because this character doesn't take anything seriously. Again, he's like struggling through depression. He doesn't have any like solid feelings. Everything he thinks and does, he's half-hearted in how he actually does it. He can think he wants to like, again, literally the first scene, he can think he wants to get up, but he won't actually get up, because that's just how that kind of like bad mental health does that. You can think you want to do something and then end up just not doing it because it just happens.
Because
you just feel like crap.
World too hard, basically.
Yeah. And that's like something I do think is well done about Kohei's depictions, that no matter what you think about him, the guy is definitely a pretty accurate depiction of someone struggling through mental health, even if it's very extreme. But yeah, I personally think once he gets his feet back together and he starts doing his romance, it's pretty cute. And then we get the Eternal World, and we actually get a whole other line with the Eternal World girl, where he straight up names the girl as Mizuka, which is why we have so many theories on what this actually is, and we won't ever get a full solid answer. It's just gonna be left vague. We can theorize for as long as we want, but Maida wants us to think. That's something he has just straight up said he wants us to do with one. Is just keep it up and come to our own conclusions. But once Kohei starts disappearing, I actually do think that this specific stretch is like one of the best disappearances in the game.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, I think this is the best, like, Eternal World version, like, plot version out of the Maida routes.
I would honestly say in general, because like, and this is partially why it is important that Kohei is like so unforgivable, is that even after everything he's done to like become a better person, there is always that nagging feeling in your brain. Was I really good enough for Mizuka? After everything I've done, am I really good enough to have that connection with Mizuka? And like, even though I know for a fact by this point, because I've read so many routes, that yes, it is. If I can just imagine someone reading this first route, or someone not expecting Mizuka, like not knowing the tropes of what one's pulling off, would Mizuka remember Kohei? Because Jesus Christ, that like all the things he's done to her, like genuinely makes it uncertain. Despite being the romance, he's been a pretty terrible boyfriend, like for half of their relationship. So it's like, when Kohei is afraid that Mizuka forgot him, I genuinely feel like this time, if there's any time that the girlfriend will forget him, it's this route. And because of that, it was really tense for me when I read this route. It's like, even the first time I was like, I don't know if Mizuka is gonna actually do it.
The scene where they walk by each other and like he kind of gives it as a final test, and then she eventually comes and hugs him from behind, like that was really good. I love that scene. Good.
It's really good, and I'd argue it only works because Kohei was an asshole beforehand. Because Mizuka was able to forgive. It shows that Mizuka.
It's a story of forgiveness. Yeah,
forgiveness and empathy. Yeah. Again, the execution wasn't great, but the ideas were amazing here.
Yeah, like I do really, really like the message behind this route, even if like, you know,
one thing keeps it from being okay.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, I respect the vision, and because I respect the vision, I don't know, I really liked it.
This entire stretch is like, personally, it was like really freaking emotional for me. Not like in a way that I was like crying, but I was like, oh, I feel so sorry for these people, because like Kohei at this point has finally found someone that he knows for a fact, like, God goes through hell, whatever come out, Mizuka will never abandon him. He's truly found someone that will be with him until the very end. And goddamn, does she stay by him until the literal end. And goddamn, when he disappears this time, it was actually pretty sad.
Yeah.
Like one detail I really liked about this CGs, and then thank you for MM for posting, is that Mizuka is smiling with Kohei, but the second he disappears, her smile fades. And it's
the art direction of this route in particular, like, just got such a glow up. I love the look of the crosswalk CG. I just think it looks so much better here because the hug from behind that she gives really sells it, but also the lap pillow, like that you were just talking about, where you see that smile all the way until the very last moment. It's so good.
Dude, okay, a lot of people have been complaining about something that people have been complaining about is not being able to see the eyes of characters in certain CGs. And I will say, with Kohei, that's a big problem. But I actually, in this specific scenario, I like it with Nagamori. Because in the original, we could see her expression, like, very clearly. But here, we don't. And I feel like that's much better because God knows how she's actually feeling. And I feel like it's much better that we can just see her smile because we don't know how she's actually feeling. And if she's, like, ready to break down at any moment, we don't know. And I much prefer that.
Yeah, I think leaving it to our as the reader interpretation of the story and just our emotional connection to the heroine, which, if you've been reading the second half of this route not pissed off, which is only some readers, you will get that emotional connection with the heroine. Like, the writing definitely, like, sells Nagamori herself and the kind of person she is. So, like, if you're getting that, I think, like, just using that connection to kind of discern how she is feeling is enough. And I love the way it looks, to the point where it's almost hard to believe that they gave us more in the original.
Yeah. Ultimately, we all know that Kohei eventually comes back, and the funny rabbit. Oh yeah, the rabbit. He gives Nagamori a funny rabbit, and you can give him a funny nickname. And something that does screw me a bit up is that the rabbit stays with his, like, it recorded his voice. So, like, that is literally the only way Nagamori had to remember him for, like, a year. Like, that one little silly voice recording. I'm not gonna say it, but there's, like, it reminds me of a certain character in Gundam where is very much the same thing, where the only thing a character could remember was a voice recording of someone precious that he lost. That, I'm not gonna delve into deeper, but that is that kind of thing and that kind of emotion that just gets hard. Because, like, I've heard this with someone with, like, a media teacher. Seeing a picture with someone isn't always going to make you cry because a picture is something that you can always have in your head constantly. But sounds are in the now. And when you experience a person's sound after not hearing it in a while, it hits a lot harder. Like, because that's something that you'll never get to see or experience without them outside of what you have already.
Just has to do with the way our memory, like, remembers things.
Yeah. So the fact that Nagamori has just held on to this rabbit, like, truly shows how much she cared for Kohei. And when he's back, and then he comes back, and yep, he sure comes back. The relationship was successful, so despite everything. So
yeah, like, the coming back from the Eternal World is definitely something we can get deeper into next week, because that's just, like, a constant throughout this game, and it is, like, I won't say it's the best version of it here, but it's certainly not the worst.
It's cute. I like the CGs.
It's cute. One little Easter egg in the last CG, or the second to last one, of Nagamori at the desk, we see she now has a new pen with a chicken on it, which is, like, created to be from the same, like, line of pens as Kohei's devil pen that is in both the remake and in the original. So that's a nice little touch that Hinoue Itoru added to this new CG as she expanded on the pen line.
It's nice, yeah. But yeah,
does anyone care about that? Probably not, but it's cute.
It is cute. And
there was, like, some angel on it originally, but so there was something of a theme, but
oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll post
I don't
that
remember.
so
It's been
everyone
a
can
while.
see.
It's yeah. Okay, I definitely see it.
It's a
I think
detail
that's
that was remembered, and I think that's what matters here.
Yeah.
yeah, that's fair enough. All right, well, I mean that's Nagamori route, by far the most controversial route as far as I remember. Lucy, you said your thoughts. Do you want to expand on them?
Not really, to be honest. Like I said it before, but I gave the route a 7. I think like the execution is a hot mess, but the way that it actually delivers its message, like with the second half, is just it's really good. The pacing is good, like which makes it just a more, solid read than Mayu's route. I did like it more, but still, of this game, it is probably the second weakest for me.
Okay, fair enough. Scout, how do you feel?
I'm gonna be honest. The reason I've been especially quiet during this segment is this is the route I've never been able to read like with a clear mind, because both times
Which is understandable.
Absolutely.
The first time I read the second half of this route, I stayed pissed off the whole time. The second time I read it here for the remake, I was just absurdly bored. I'm going to be very blunt. I think this is one of the most boring things I've ever read in a VN. I could not enjoy the relationship between the two of them just because I could not disconnect it from the very bad thing.
Yeah.
And a problem to me because of that is I feel like it's the barest route because of that. Like, if you're not enjoying the relationship, there's not a ton going on in the second half. There's no real subplots or like major character development outside of the small things that Kohei accomplishes.
And also the stuff that's constant throughout multiple routes.
I wouldn't say there isn't any major development. It's the same development we get in other routes, but like here it's a lot harder to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would also argue that this is the only development that Kohei has gotten where it is focused on him specifically. It's like not a byproduct. Kohei actually confronts his issues head on for the first time and arguably the only time, and he actually overcomes them, which is something that I think I do personally appreciate about this route. Is that it's called the Nagamori route, but it's actually a Kohei route. Like he's the person with the problem here, and Nagamori's the one helping him through his struggles.
And like that's kind of neat, but also it's kind of what contributes to her being my second least favorite of the cast, because I don't know, she only gets so much within this. If you're not a huge fan of what you get from the start, like I don't think you're gonna change much in opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair, yeah. I can definitely see that.
I think for my score, like listening to you two like hash out the themes and such of it did make me like see more than I did originally, but it's not enough to save the route for me. So I'm giving it like a 4 because I genuinely can't name a key route I've enjoyed reading less.
That's fair. Like, this is a controversial route. This is by far the most hated route, and as you'll soon see, it is still my least favorite route. I gave this a 6, which is lower than Lucy's score, surprisingly.
Yeah.
You would not be able to tell this with how I'm defending it. I have severe issues with this route, but despite everything that this route has that very much I take issue with, I do think that the ideas behind it are great, and I do applaud Maida for trying to tackle depression in a way that is very much like it doesn't hide or romanticize anything. It's not saying it's going to be easy. Mental health is hard to deal with. When it's rough, it can be very harmful, not just for you, but for everyone around you. And I do appreciate that Maida acknowledges that.
It's like a respect division thing.
Yeah. The execution, not great. However, I do think the idea behind the route is good enough. And like, I mean, my favorite character is Yuko Amamiya. How am I gonna dislike Nagamori?
Yeah, I see the connection here.
They're
I
both
honestly
simply
don't know
very
who that
caring
is.
people.
Amazing. We went through, like 4 routes of this game, and this was only the first mention of F. Like,
that explains a lot.
I have brain rot, but yeah, it's getting very late, but we still have one more route to talk about. Let's talk about Nanase. So this is
man.
the positive one, the one that we all have grown on greatly since the original.
I still got a big problem with this one that we'll get to in a bit, but like the big thing to note here is that Nanase was kind of like, if Misaki gets the favorite heroine award from Keyverse Book Club, Nanase gets the most improved award.
I wouldn't just say that. Like, she's the fan favorite now of people in general. Like, outside of Keyverse, I would say. Like, first of all, for those who don't know, out of the heroine cast, Nanase is Hino Itoru's favorite heroine. She loves her, and because of that, she's drawn a lot of illustrations of Nanase, and also she's really, really good looking in the remake. Because, oh my god, what a glow up, girl! You smoking now, but yeah. It's not just that, but the staff also really like her, and because of that, it sort of had like a very interesting effect where since she had so much advertising, a lot of the people in online and Twitter space on YouTube, I've noticed, they all really like Nanase as well. She's like, her popularity has grown a lot from the remake, by far the most of any other heroine, and personally, I'm very happy about it because I feel like Nanase was generally a more forgotten heroine compared to the rest in the original. Like, her route was never the least favorite, but there was only like a few people, like say like you, Scout, who really loved her. Like, she didn't really have the biggest fan base, if that makes sense. But after the remake, her popularity just skyrocketed.
Oh yeah, as someone who's liked her a ton since reading the original only a few months ago, like, it makes me happy to see so much more Nanase appreciation.
Oh yeah. Like, especially like she's on like the magazines and everything, and Lucy, I'm sure you'd like to comment on her design improvements.
Oh, she's fucking hot now. Like, it's like it really started with like what was it was the Santa outfit that was for Bug.
I would say the first time it really started for me was seeing her that fall down CG, and it not being absolutely terrible.
That was the first one, because like that CG was so jank in the original, and I think just in the original, Nanase got the most jank CGs between that and the kimchi one, kimchi ramen. But they both look really good now, in addition to all the other CGs that she got, including the fucking kendo CG. I was not prepared for that. I'm
hot take. I kind of prefer that design.
Sep has said that's his favorite new CG in the game. Is really the Nanase Kendo CG.
It's not often for a CG to actually make me be like, damn. But Nanase CGs definitely did that to me here.
Yeah.
Especially the desk one, like, damn. Yeah, that's a blow up, all right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
God. But yeah, Nanase route, I would say, out of the Maida ones, is by far the most quote-unquote normal. It's not normal because it has Maida Kohei and this guy's an idiot, but he is by far the most tolerable in this route out of the routes because he's, for one, or for a decent portion of it, he's not a terrible person. He's still pretty.
It's the least controversial of these 3 routes. I think the writing is almost as bad as Mayu's. I think is a hot take, but like you'll have to hear my defense.
I'm going to be going on quite a speech if this is the direction we're going
Go,
in. But,
go ahead.
well, first, I want to go in order, so that means we have to acknowledge the common route parts of it first, and I'm going to be blunt. In terms of how the common route represents them, I hate Kohei and Nanase's dynamic during this was my least favorite by far.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the heroines, Nanase is the one that Kohei bullies the most.
And, like, it's not just, like, picking on her in, like, a way Yuichi or Yukito might. He is violent.
He's really mean.
Within the first few days of knowing her, he ties her hair to a chair and gives her whiplash. He cuts her hair off. He elbows her in the stomach. And he does this because he thinks it's funny. That's the thing that really needs to be focused on. She does not provoke him most of the time.
She doesn't, no. Poor girl.
Yeah, like I've never been a fan of like the punching bag archetype in Key. I hated it with Tsunohara. I didn't particularly care much for it with Makoto even, but like here it's the worst.
Like if you're going to have it, you need to at least like give a reason, an understandable reason for it to be happening. Like with
instead
Makoto,
of just like I want to like expose her as the tsundere she is and not, you know, the girl she's pretending to be, despite the fact that we later know that Nanase has been bullied before coming to this school. You know, it's just it's sad.
Yeah,
it's sad. This poor girl cannot catch a break.
And like
imagine transferring to a new school and having to sit in front of this jackass. Like that must really suck.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to describe, and I'll grant one thing I didn't quite notice on my first read through. It does tone down a lot after the first few days, where he basically just resorts to verbal jabs and such, especially after, well, the popularity contest that we'll have to address. So, like, it's not like he's being completely terrible with her once they start knowing each other better, but it's still not something that appeals to me or I find funny.
Same.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone will argue that Kohei in this route is just kind of terrible. I've already said my piece on Kohei is that this dude doesn't think anything he does has any consequences. That's just how he is. And I'd argue in this route, his problems are by far brushed out under the rug the least. He doesn't really change that much aside from like we'll discuss to it, but I don't
hear what I don't
feel like
say.
Yeah, fair enough. But I feel like this dude is just an absolute prankster. This poor girl just wants to have a normal school life and she just damn can't. So the first thing that happens, of course, is the popularity contest. And it's something that happens in all routes, but with Nanase, you have to get top marks. You have to make Nanase the most popular girl in the entire class. And once you do that...
It's easier said than done without the
It is so much easier said than done. Oh my god, thank God for the hint system. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like we were talking about like the biggest downfall of the hint system earlier this episode. The biggest benefit of the hint system is the fucking test. Like I hate the test. Like it's so such a stupid idea. Like that doesn't really play into the narrative of one's choice system. It was just supposed to be a cute little thing, and I think it really just didn't pay off. It's tedious, it's not fun. Like it's it's like
pay attention to half the options, because if it's either Kohei's answer or Nanase's answer, but for each one they give you 4 choices.
And yeah, but you don't know that without the hint system, because like you only need to get a perfect score to get on Nanase route, but like if you want to see all of the like unique dialogue for it, you get unique dialogue for getting a 10, a 9, an 8, 1 through 7 are the same, and 0. So there are 4 sets of unique dialogue for this. It's ridiculous.
It's terrible.
It's so bad.
As someone who really likes to mess around and like try to complete all the possible dialogue,
bad memories.
Yeah.
But yeah, after you get past that, yay, Nanase is popular. That's a double-edged sword because
rip the plot of this route. What?
Yeah, I figured it was gonna be this, but yeah, let's go through this too before I try to give my speech.
Yeah, we got to talk about Maki because Maki is probably the most hated character in this game.
Understandably so, because she has no redeeming qualities. She literally does not have any scenes to redeem her. Like, as bad as Kohei is, at least that guy tries to become a better person later. This bitch has nothing, and I hate her, and everyone hates her. Like, it's
and yet in the epilogue, she randomly becomes friends with Nanase. I'm like, what?
Which
that
makes
doesn't make
no sense.
Why?
I don't feel anything about her because she has 3 scenes total.
And yet she was like important enough to get a sprite and a design and a special artwork for the remake, and it's like
she's like a
really
plot device.
She is a plot device, but it's really funny because they act on what Lucy says. Like in the advertisement, they had everyone whose voice like say a scene in like to count down for the remakes, and her scene was literally, why am I here? I'm just a minor character. I don't think I'm.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Am I allowed to be here? She's like, am I allowed to be hyping up this game? Does anyone care about me? Hello? And I'm like,
no, not really.
Fair enough. Yeah. If you were looking forward to Maki from the advertising, I'm sorry. She's literally just exists to be a bad person, and she was so forgettable that in the original game, I literally forgot she had a sprite.
Yeah, only appearing in this one route, and like, you know, doesn't really contribute much, but like we do have this whole plot happening with like, you know, the thumbtacks and stuff, and how the bullying here is just like even more mean-spirited than what Kohei does at the beginning of Common Route. Maybe. Like, I feel like if they wanted to sell this better, they could have made Kohei not nearly as much of an asshole in the beginning of Common Route, because now it just feels like hypocritical of Kohei to go defending her so deeply.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too.
Once it like comes to a head at the end, and like it's a really good scene where he like steps in and takes the cookies and stuff and starts eating the cookies after like they got thrown on the ground or whatever it was, but at the same time it did not feel believable. It like this was like the time where Kohei felt the most inconsistent to me.
Yeah.
Like on a reread, like they both kind of flop back and forth on whether they'll admit it, but by this point, I think both Kohei and Nanase consider each other their friends, however, somewhat reluctantly. And Nanase will even outright say that if you choose a certain answer at one point. So and considering that goes along with his bullying of her dropping a lot, I do at least believe this time around that he had come to somewhat care for her.
On the bright side, I'm pretty sure in this round you can finally make Nanase punch Kohei, which, let's go!
Oh yeah, that has to happen.
It only happens once, but when it happened, I was very happy. Like,
yay! He finally got what he deserved. You can also have that happen in Mayu route, but you have to be like a really big idiot. Like, you have to like put her uniform up for auction, guys. But
what the hell? I didn't get that choice. I didn't know
it's
that.
It's honestly one of the funniest choices.
Yeah, back to Mayu route for like 1 second. when you get her uniform, and she promised her not to do anything with it, and you get the option to be a normal person, or you can be Kohei. And if you choose to be Kohei, he whispers to Sumi, he's like, "Yo, I got Nanase's uniform. I'm taking serious bids only. There's nothing. It is Nanase's uniform is drenched in her sweat. Like putting himself for bids, and Sumi's like, all right, I gotcha, boss." And so this paper goes around the entire classroom.
Yes, we get a whole bidding war.
Literally a bidding war, and by the end,
it ends with 1 million yen.
1 million yen. So when Sumi goes to ask Kohei for this, Nanase just punches him in the face.
Yeah, it's a harmless choice too. That's the best part.
It's fully deserved.
I think it's like hearing your description of it. It sounds funny, but only because it gets punched in the face.
Yes, it's
like
he does not get away with it.
Yeah,
he doesn't get away with it, and it's fully deserved. And that's the other way he can get punched. But God, is it nice for him to get punched? But yeah. Anyway,
back to Nanase route. She's getting bullied by this awful girl because she's the most popular in class, and Kohei, after some trials, including trying to make her hate him because he thinks the harassment is directed at him, tracks it down.
Also, a very traumatizing mental image of Nanase getting split open by a pipe.
Oh God, yeah.
I can never take that out of my memory.
But yeah, she tracks down who did it. Nanase tries to make peace with her. Maki does not want to make peace, and just as Nanase is about to lose her temper and expose how she really is, quote unquote, in front of everyone, he steps in and basically solves it, or, well, takes her away from it.
He does it in the most Kohei way possible, but it's the only time where the Kohei solution is actually kind of cool.
Yeah, I liked the scene a lot. It was really, really fun to just see Kohei actually be a both himself and also a really good person at the same time, because those normally don't go together.
He's in character, he's still an idiot, but he's being an idiot in a way that benefits those he cares about. And it's for the sake of you, I will put myself through complete shame because I'm just numb to this. It's just my job at this point.
Yeah, it's it's a really well done scene. And then we get some gags after that with him getting the next batch of cookies taken away, and she gets really sad, and I felt terrible about that.
Yeah, I think this is the point where I'll kind of start, because this is the turning point of the route. But first, I think I need to ask, Lucy, you're saying that you think the plot of the route was supposed to be the bullying, if I'm getting that right?
It's not so much that I think it was supposed to be that, it's that the route just, how do I say it? The route completely shelves this plot, and in favor of another one. Is the new one any better or worse? Not particularly. I do enjoy the romance of it a lot, and also learning about Nanase's past. It's all good. It's just that, why did this one thing just end the bullying and then we never check in with Maki again? They don't even acknowledge that the bullying stopped. It's just ignored. And I just think from a writing perspective, that was really fucking dumb.
I admit that it's a very rough patch, but I'll be honest, I do not think it was ever supposed to be anything besides a way to properly get the route started. It was a way to put Kohei in a situation where he can show that he does care about Nanase and give her a proper reason to actually start falling for him.
Which is understandable, just I wanted some acknowledgement of it after the fact, and we never got that.
Fair enough, but I do not think it was necessarily that they brought in a new plot, because if anything, it ties in with the concept that Nanase is even introduced with, which is Nanase.
I guess that is true, yeah.
Nanase they kind of pull a bait and switch with Nanase, because the image you're given is that she is trying to act like a perfect little lady in front of everyone, but underneath that she is very tomboyish and has a temper that she can't always control.
I'm pretty sure Lucy also has a problem with this as well, but we can get into that once we get to like the final thoughts.
But
with what?
Her depiction, like how she is as a person.
Oh, she's just a weak tsundere. Like
I thought you didn't like how like the 90s stereotypes like made her the way she is. Or was that not the case?
I don't remember that. No.
Fair enough.
But yeah, she's presented as a tsundere, and you think that's how she is inside, and Kohei thinks that too, but the point that the route really starts showing once she actually starts having feelings for him, and especially once they get into a relationship, is she's not necessarily faking anything, or at least she's not faking how she wants to be. The face she puts on in front of everyone else is absolutely fake, and that's something I couldn't really tell until the remake with the improved voice acting. It's very animated and extra girly and very fake sounding. Like, it's nothing at all like how she sounds when she's just calm. So she is putting on a false face, but it's also not as simple as that's not who she's trying to be either. Because the backstory is she devoted like most of her early years to kendo, and
suddenly that was taken away from her. But like you said, shoutouts to Maida Kaori here, Nanase Seiyu. You could tell, and Manpig said this too during his read, I think, you could tell how much fun she was having in this role.
Oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Like she very, and she has a lot of love for her character as well. Like, during the advertising stages, she was constantly saying like, "Hey, this is the I get to voice this character. This is me." And then like, look forward to the release of this game. I'm gonna be voicing Nanase. She was like really into it, and Hinoe even drew her an illustration of Nanase, of her, like the actual real person with Nanase. I was like, oh, that's so cute.
Oh, that's adorable.
I don't think I knew that. That's awesome.
You're gonna have to post
she
that
got an
somewhere.
illustration of her with her character, and it was like the most adorable thing of all time. Yeah, let me see if I can dig it up. It's really back in the day, but I should be able to dig it up if I look hard enough.
But before we forget, but yeah, in her backstory, she suffers an injury that keeps her from actively participating in kendo anymore, and the leader of the kendo club at the time actually promotes her to the new leader, and she basically sees it through to the end until I think shortly before she transfers to Kohei's school. And at the end of that, he basically tells her to... The wording is a bit iffy, I'll admit, but he basically tells her to find the other side of herself that she had been ignoring all this time. Because with how much she had devoted herself to kendo, she hadn't really explored her feminine side at all. Like, there's a whole side of herself that she doesn't really know anything about, and now that she's taken her main focus for most of her life to basically to its conclusion, the only thing she can really do or wants to do is explore that unexplored side of herself. And that's what leads to her behavior when she transfers to Kohei's school. She's really trying, but she's also very self-conscious and sensitive, which is the main reason she doesn't work out on her own. She's afraid of being completely honest in front of everyone else. So it leads to her fake persona that she shows to most people. Yeah. But once she starts falling for Kohei, in the aftermath of that bullying incident, she suddenly becomes not a tsundere at all. She suddenly becomes much more gentle and sweet around him.
Well, that's just the dere side of a tsundere. Like, the classic tsundere is once you get rid of that exterior, like, you really get to see who the true person is underneath. So, like, I don't think that, like, gets her away from her archetype. I just think, like, her Soon side is just generally weak.
Well, the Soon side basically starts vanishing once you get to this point, I think is the point. Like, around Kohei, as they become closer to closer, and he actually starts treating her a lot better, she slowly starts growing into the person she was trying to be, and you see, like, underneath who she really is. Instead of just a tomboy with a temper, she is someone who is as sweet at her heart as Nagamori.
I would say that the reason only her romance with Kohei was going to work is because Kohei is the only person she has not put up an act towards. Kohei is the only person who knows the real Nanase, because she's been putting up that act to everyone, but you're not gonna form a close relationship with someone if you're acting in front of them all the time. They need to see the real you, and Kohei likes Nanase not because of she's a big pretty girl, but because she's Nanase, and I think that's really sweet. that's something I do really like about the relationship.
I do really like that as well, for sure.
Yeah, I kind of got lost when I was trying to say that, but yeah, he's the only person she can be completely vulnerable, or at least honest, around.
Well, we can see that just in, like, the fact that she tells him, you know, her backstory about Kendo and stuff, and, like, how you could see that was something that was clearly affecting her, and she, you know, made the point to talk to him about it, which was really wonderful. And the other moment is, like, I mentioned, like, in an art context, the kimchi ramen CG, but how upset she got that her idealized Christmas with him was not going according to the plan she set for herself in her head, which also goes back to what Manpig was saying about how Christmas is a time for lovers and stuff. And it's just, it didn't go the way she wanted it to. And, like, the fact that you could see how hurt she was by that really shows that she cares about him.
Oh yeah, like, in the days leading up to Christmas, she's doing a lot for him and not being subtle. She's baking him cookies. She's going out with him after school. She's even coming into his house. Like, they're closer than they've ever been. And she even keeps herself away from the party that Mizuka would normally be attending, because she wants to be able to do it with Kohei, but she just can't come out and say that outright.
Yeah, the whole sequence where you have her get Kohei ready for school is actually really fun. Like, and the reward you get for it in the original was awful, but it was a H scene / bad end that you could get. But the fact that they worked that into the good end that keeps going here, so you can still see the CGs without the gross stuff, I'm happy with it. Now, Manpig, you're saying thank God. I'll defend it in the original. It is nowhere near as bad as what it is in Nagamori's route, for the specific fact that doing the bad thing to the girl leads to the bad end, and that Nanase has enough self-respect for that it breaks her bond with Kohei.
Yeah, which is fair, but I also want to get all the CGs.
Yeah, like, it's not fun to read, but like, in that particular case, it's like, I think it's more tastefully done in Nanase route than it is in Mizuka. That's just me.
And it's something that makes a lot more sense when you understand the overall story of one better, so I'll give it that. But
it actually might, in like some fucked up way, it actually might be the only like story relevant H scene in the game. is the optional bad end one.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't think H scenes should be in keyworks. I don't like them. I really never like them. So yeah,
I'm so glad they're gone.
I am too. I do not miss them. But yeah,
I guess following up on the Christmas thing, like once that misunderstanding is cleared up very explicitly by her, and she tells him what it was she wanted to do, which was go to a dance hall, Kohei finally takes the hint, and even though it's way too late for them to go to one, he decides that they'll dance in the park they're currently in.
This is like
that is a very
it's
big
so
turning
sweet.
moment.
Yeah.
This is where I think this route really begins, because you said you didn't think Kohei grew much in this route. And like, I guess by comparison to the other meta routes, I'd agree, but I do not think that he's staying static at all. I think he and Nanase both are growing, like basically every scene throughout this route, but it's just very slow and very subtle, and it basically all revolves around how well they are understanding each other. I think that's the big thing. Kohei is an oblivious idiot. Even once they officially get in a relationship and they're being pretty much 100% sweet to each other whenever they can, he still doesn't fully get what she's after or what she's trying to do or what she's going to do. Like, since we mentioned the waking up thing, like that's in March, which they'd already been in a relationship for several months at that point. But his first mental image of what's going to happen when she comes over to wake him up is that she's going to do it in the most violent way possible.
It was really funny, actually.
Yeah, she's going to rip him out of bed, tear up his pajamas, stuff his breakfast into his face, and then just drag him out the door.
I kind of want to see it, to be honest.
I same, like, that would be really funny.
But when it happens in reality, he gets the exact opposite. She's so gentle and unwilling to be harsh with him that they end up late because he didn't even realize what was happening.
Yeah, and like also just she needed to learn the middle ground. Yeah, I guess I can get behind it that the development, like at the very least their romantic development as a couple is really well done.
And it drives them to both grow as people, I feel. Like, I think there's as much plot going on here as any ordinary one route. I just think that it's intertwined in a much closer way with the romance, and that it's not presented up front in the same way.
I just think, like, Maida had something going with the dealing with bullying plot that he didn't follow through on. And whether it's because he didn't have time and needed to focus on the romance, or he actually didn't want to, I don't know. It's anyone's guess. I don't think it was particularly well written to be telling one story and then suddenly start telling a different one. That's like my single biggest issue with this route. Like, especially like on the second read, it became a lot more obvious to me, and it did frustrate me, I hate to say.
I mean, that's fair. Like, I do think it's a bit messy no matter what. It's just, like I said, I didn't focus on it much even at the start.
That's been a theme with this entire podcast. It's a bit messy.
Yeah.
But oh man, what else can? But I guess one more thing about the waking up sequence is it is like a genuine puzzle. Like, even compared to the test, there's a very specific sequence of events you have
also
to go
that
through.
You can't get it right the first time, which is also I think kind of cool, actually.
You have 3 days to get him on school on time, but there's one option that is the only way to succeed that doesn't work out on the first day.
Yeah.
But when you do it, assuming you do it, it's like one of the biggest character moments in the route, I think, because it's like the proof to Nanase that she can match up to Mizuka, because that's always been her comparison point, especially when it comes to Kohei. Mizuka is like a very perfect lady without even trying to be.
Right, and it came up like even with the popularity contest too, where
yeah,
Nanase
she's always
like,
a rival.
Yeah, how am I gonna measure up to Mizuka? And Kohei's like, really, her?
Yeah, he can't see it, but everyone else does, and she does it without trying. So she definitely contributes to Nanase's, I guess, insecurity and self-conscious attitude.
Right.
But the fact that she even can potentially do something that seemingly Mizuka was the only one able to do is, I guess, the biggest showcase of how Nanase is at her core and the kind of lady she can be.
Now that you mention it, yeah, I definitely do see that. My statement on Kohei wasn't necessarily in terms of his relationship building. I was talking about him overcoming his demons, like how he does in the Nakamori route. And I guess you can argue to some extent he doesn't in some other routes, but I would argue because the issue with that is his fear of being forgotten is more exemplified in other routes compared to this one. And I feel like that's like part of what makes his character with like have a conflict to begin with, that he's scared that because of what he's done and because of his apathy that he's going to disappear. And I feel like with Nanase, that at least for me, that's the stakes weren't as set up, if that makes sense.
That's actually one point, like probably the last big point I wanted to get to. So and this leads into right after the waking up sequence, but so earlier in the story, when, like before the waking up sequence, when Kohei is first noticing the effects of the Eternal World getting to him very briefly, he tries to go to Nanase for comfort. She thinks he's asking for something more. And it leads into, that whole sequence of them going over to his room and trying to do it, that in the remake, at least, they end up stopping halfway through because Kohei realizes...
Hugging.
Yeah, they hug because Kohei realizes it's not, like, it's a bit too soon for that. Which
I'm
I
personally
think,
very happy with that because I love hugs.
I think this is the route most improved by cutting out the H scene, because I think it was a bit uncomfortable how he was basically taking advantage of her misunderstanding originally. And I saw this as like a much sweeter conclusion.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, like I don't remember being particularly bothered by the H scene of this in the original, but also maybe it's because my memory is of the worst ones in this game, of which there are many. So like Mizuka, like Mayu, like the other Nanase one, even Mio to some extent, and like I don't know. I'd like side note. Going one last thing to say on that topic. I love how Akane's is like the least offensive H scene in the game, and it's one of the only ones that's skippable.
Funny.
Thanks, game.
Really funny.
Thanks, tactics. Anyway,
not only do I find the change to the scene sweeter, I think it also makes more sense with what comes after.
I absolutely second that, yes.
When he finally he goes through the Mizuka backstory and he realizes he's going to be forgotten soon. You thought that he didn't have like the same kind of reaction to the idea of him being forgotten as in other routes, but I actually disagree. I think he responds to it here in a much different fashion. He's, if anything, defiant towards the idea. His first idea after realizing it is to try to form a bond, quote unquote, a sexual one, with Nanase because he thinks that'll be able to tie him down to it, to the world. And if
I
in the
think
bad
that's
ending,
kind of a normal response.
yeah, like you can kind of understand it, I guess.
I can understand how he comes to that conclusion, even if I think it's wrong. But the thing is, in this case, the game also thinks it's wrong.
Yes.
So I don't have an issue with that.
In the event he gets what he wants, it basically immediately leads to the bad ending because that's not the kind of
He hurt
bond.
Nanase, and Nanase has enough self-respect to say, I didn't like that, you know?
Which is good.
And
Yeah.
in every other outcome, he realizes that doing this would actually be wrong, both because it would hurt her and because it would be a meaningless sort of bond. One that would
Exactly.
not help anyone. Which,
Yes.
again, this makes a lot more sense without the H scene actually happening, because it's like, it hasn't actually happened either way here. It makes more sense for him to think it. But with that change, with that event, soon comes the climax, which is him, essentially his final deed, his final attempt to push at Nanase. He buys her a dress with basically all his money on the day that he's going to disappear, and he sends it to her. And he tells her to meet up with him at the park so they can go to a dance hall. And the last thing he thinks before he disappears and she arrives to find him gone is, we'll see which one arrives at the top first. And I don't know if I'm just reading it wrong, but I saw that as a very defiant kind of response that I don't see from Maida Kohei otherwise. It's him basically daring his whole situation to keep him from getting to her.
I
That's an
love this
interesting way of
interpretation,
taking that.
actually. Like,
Yeah,
I
that's an
love
interesting
it.
way of looking at it. I haven't really. That's a really interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, I've never thought of it
Because
that way.
Me
One
neither.
thing I used to think about when comparing Maida Kohei to Hisaya Kohei is Hisaya Kohei, usually when he's about to disappear, he makes a silent declaration that he will return from the eternal world back to the heroine, which is something that he does not try to say in Mizuka's route or Mayu's route. He sounds like a lot more accepting of it. This is the one time where I think that's different. This is the one time where I think he's really determined. He really has a place to come back to. He's really determined to come back from this compared to any other Maida route. And I think
definitely
with
that's
that,
fair.
it
Yeah.
leads to Kohei developing in a very unique way.
It's definitely unique. I'm mainly just talking about him overcoming his depression, but it is really cool interpretation of him finding a place and figuring out what it means to interact in a different way, interact with people and form a meaningful connection in a different way he did with the other heroines. Because yeah, that would make Nanase's relationship with the eternal world one of a kind and all of one, which is, God, I'm really glad you came here to talk about that, because that's a
Yes.
really good
I'm so happy I
interpretation.
could say
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
yeah, and with the ending to the climax there, as just got to post, we see Nanase in that dress, and with
It's
that
beautiful. I love the
One
dress.
of the best CGs in the game. I'm just gonna
And-
say it. Oh my God,
Yeah.
Slay!
For
with
real.
that sight, we see her like finally complete her journey to find the rest of herself. She looks like a lady in a way that I still can almost not believe.
Such good CGs.
Yeah, like, and the fact that there's like multiple of them now. The design of the dress was also changed, and like,
Looks
It's-
so much better.
I love the way that it looks now. Yeah.
Looks so much better.
One thing I always thought when comparing the designs of Nanase is I feel like her original design looked like taller, a bit less cute, like kind of more like approaching a lady, and I wasn't sure how she would look in the remake in that dress, but like, wow. You can tell Hinoe knew what she was doing with this design for it to work out so perfectly.
Hinoe simply popped off, and she's a gift to us. God bless.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, Kohei coming in a funeral tuxedo is absolutely hilarious. Let me just say that.
Yeah, that was like actually one of my favorite Kohei gags of the entire game.
It's like the perfect little topper to their relationship in the epilogue there. Like,
yeah,
they're not doing everything completely right, and they're still bickering a bit, but they both know that's just how
normal.
It is. They accept it.
It's normal. It's
weird,
sweet.
and they love each other for being weird. That's what makes it adorable.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is like one of the. This is probably the best relationship where like these characters are fully cognizant of each other's flaws and they don't care, and they're like, we'll make this work.
Yes, that's what makes it work for me. Like, on the surface, I was not convinced if I would like these two, but like this route does so much to convince me of it. Like,
the flaws are like normal people in relationship flaws, and like this is the one thing that we've been saying about like the realism of Maeda's writing of these characters throughout this entire episode is that like he goes for realism even if it's not like the appealing side of the tropes. And in terms of the romance, this route easily sweeps the other two for me in terms of that realism.
Absolutely. Like,
I would say it has the best balance, yeah.
It's because they know each other so thoroughly that it's even able to work in the first place.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a one-of-a-kind relationship, and honestly, Nanase would be happier with someone who knows her for who she is instead of who she wants them to think they are.
Yes,
that's what makes a healthy relationship. Yeah.
And with that, my grand Nanase rant is concluded.
Thank you, Scout. Like, I'm so glad we had you here.
I don't know if this is coming through the camera, but I'm clapping. Or not the camera, the mic.
I can hear it a bit. Thank you very much for allowing me to do this.
Yeah. All right. Ratings. I'll go first because I don't want to follow you two. I still gave this route a 7. I think it's like ever so slightly higher than Nagamori, but the writing does hold it back for me. Even though I do really like the romance to it, I wish the other aspects, the bullying stuff, and like how these two deal with that was more explored and not just kind of left by the wayside. It is an issue that is not huge, but big enough where the route felt a bit disjointed to me in terms of writing. So it's the strongest of the 3 routes we talked about today, but I still think it's weaker than all of Hisaya's routes. So that's my critical piece of it. I think you two are a bit more positive on this route than I was.
I mean that's fair with what I said about Mayu's route.
Everyone has their own opinions. Yeah. What I feel is I've said that I think this is like the most wholesome, conventional Galgay route out of all. I mean, pretty much all of them except for maybe like Mio. It's definitely the most normal Galgay route. Like it is very much focused on a relationship, and Maeda's definitely reined himself more like in terms of like showing Kohei's more extreme side. They have the roughest common route. We've all mentioned that. It's like, Jesus Christ, what is going on? But once they break past that, the Galgay route, once the Galgay actually like kicks in, it's really wholesome, and Nanase is very charming. You really, once you like get what she's facing, like I do want her to reach a point where she's satisfied with herself, and I feel like what she achieved with Kohei is pretty much the best she will ever achieve with anyone, because as I said, it's real people. They know each other in a genuine way that is not like based on any like stereotypes or expectations. And like, yeah, I do wish they explored their backstory a bit more with Nanase, but I understand why not. It's like, obviously, there's a few more things that at focus, and the relationship is done well enough that's like, yeah, of course, you prioritize the relationship. It's Galgay. My biggest critique is that Maki became friends with Nanase by the end of the route, which makes no sense. But yeah, aside from that, 8 out of 10. I really like this route. It's a Galgate route, and I enjoyed it, and Nanase is cute. Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh man. And for mine, I mean, I just gave the entirety of my thoughts on this route, so I can't say that much more. But I guess for context, I personally give Mio's route like a 7 because I think it's a good baseline route, but the parts of it that stand out most to me are the parts that aren't really focused on, so I can only like it so much. I give Misaki's route a 9. I think it's one of my favorite key routes right now. For how much I talked up Nanase's route right now, you think I'd give it like an 11 out of 10, but I honestly give it like an 8 too. Like
Surprising, but interesting.
Like, I mean, if we didn't do whole numbers, it'd be closer to like an 8.5, if not quite. But if we're sticking to whole numbers, yeah, like I can't put it on the same tier as Misaki's route because again, I hate the common route lead up to this route, and I do agree that I do agree there is like a bit of a feeling of like not quite having enough time to do everything it does, but in the way it entwines the romance and the character development that both of its leads go through, I think it's really impressive. Like, Nanase is not the most complex heroine in this, but how much they managed to do with her, like, without
in such a short runtime.
Yes, and without a lot of big scenes, I think is the thing. Like, it can seem like there's not a story just because the biggest scene, like the most dramatic one that goes on, is the Christmas scene.
Yeah.
Like, without that, it's just a lot of really small moments where you have to be looking out for the meaning of them.
Well, but that's what romance is like sometimes.
Yeah, and like I didn't catch some of it on my first read through, but again, I thought about this a lot after finishing, and I think in the end it's a super enjoyable, super sweet route that is just I just really respect what it's able to tell without really drawing that much attention to it all.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'm happy. That's a very long episode, but hey, that's how we're doing it for one book club.
There was a lot to discuss.
Yes. But I'm happy like we were able to do all 3 of these routes justice in one episode, spending
I'm very happy with this.
Basically about 55 minutes on each route. Like, just looking at the timing. So
there was a lot to talk about, especially with Mayu and Nagamori. Those are like so much discussion, and Scout's like breakdown on Nanase. So good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so next week will be the conclusion of one book club. We'll talk about Shun, we'll talk about Akane, and we'll talk about Eternal World stuff. And just kind of put together one as a whole. The 3 of us will be returning as hosts for that episode. And then after that, on the 16th of February, Utori will return along with Found's Key Radio Live debut, on our other newest Key Keeper, for Season 4, Episode 9, on the Magic of Key, Tomoyo After, and Kudo After. So, that's what we have to look forward to, and that's a wrap. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
See you guys later.